Welcome back to another episode of Out of Home Insider. Today's episode is all about building and scaling marketing teams, cultures that consistently overachieve and outperform, and how to do it in a work-from-home world. Joined by Joe Quattrone, SVP and Head of Marketing at the Sasha Group West, a VaynerX company, we'll take a peek under the hood of the tip of the spear that is the Sasha Group. An OG of social media marketing in the truest sense and a student of advertising's roots, Joe offers a unique perspective that is equal parts executive leadership and practical, tactical insight that you can use today to impact your organization or the brands you work with. Joe talks about the brands he sees leaning into out-of-home advertising and offers insight that will be sure to spur some new ideas or dust off some old ones. And if you ever want to get some new ideas, make sure to check out onescreen.ai and sign up for our newsletter. It's filled with insights, tips, and opportunities for brands and marketers to predictably scale in any market. Check out onescreen.ai and sign up today. Without further ado, let's go.
Welcome, everybody, to the Out of Home Insider Show, a podcast like no other, hosted by the one and only Tim Rowe. Get ready to have some knowledge dropped on you and to be entertained, because nothing's more valuable than food for your brain. So sit back, relax, we're about to dive in as the best industry podcast is about to begin.
Joe, thanks so much for being here. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Me too, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's start at the beginning. How did you get into advertising? You've got a bit of a unique origin story. I know that you've had aspirations of being a CMO and are certainly well on the trajectory to do that. But maybe start folks with how you got into advertising and marketing.
It was at a very young age. When I was 21-ish, I had another life-altering moment in my, happened to me. At that point, I had not started college. I was 300 pounds. I was working, I was still, doing my bit as a member of society. I was acting as a accounts payable rep for an IT firm. So I was learning a little bit about business math and working for a controller. But yeah, I was overweight. I drank too much. I probably smoked a little bit too much dope, that kind of stuff. Really wasn't motivated to do anything coming out of high school. I had no idea what I wanted to do. It wasn't that I was dumb or anything like that. I got decent grades, but I was highly average and very unmotivated. And then I actually went through the process of, I lost over 100 pounds in 9 months. So I got down eventually to like 175.
Amazing.
And once I saw that kind of goal setting lead to actual success, and just so people know how I did it, I essentially I didn't set out to lose over 100 pounds. I set out to run every day for 100 straight days. The output of running for 100 straight days led to me becoming more motivated. That led to me running for well over 100 straight days and led to the weight flying off without even really having to diet. But then again, I was also a 21-year-old with a high metabolism. But really coming out of that, it was the act of really like setting my mind to something and achieving it, seeing the success that led me to start to think about what I wanted to do with my life. And I think on some of those days where I was running around the lake in Reston, Virginia, that I started putting my sights on what was next for me. And the thing that I kept coming to was collectibles, oddly enough. Everybody in my life around me was a collector of some sorts. My dad and my uncle collected cars and motorcycles and, any kind of knickknacks. My dad used to collect old school refrigerators, like Coke refrigerators that he'd find at garage sales. And he always wanted to fix things up. And so I started thinking about what it was that made things have intrinsic value. Why did people like to collect things specifically with brand icons and logos on them? And that just led me to do more research. And eventually I kind of settled in on something in the creative arts because I find myself to be a very idea-centric human. And it led me to advertising and marketing. And because I had just gone through such a momentous occasion of goal setting and seeing the benefit of that goal planning, I decided to set my sights on an even more ambitious target, which was my career. And I made a very long-term but very specific goal for myself, and I've been working on that ever since. I decided I wanted to be the CMO of a Fortune 500 company one day, and I gave myself till my mid 40s to get there, because I was like, well, by the time I'm 45, I'll be old and finished, and I want to be at the top of the mountain by then. And I'm 42 now, so I'm getting close to my 21-year-old definition of old and finished. But I think my goal is slightly altered since then. I've had a lot of experience dealing with the Fortune 500, so I doubt that that's really where I want to go. But being a chief market officer of a brand is still something that I've got some thoughts about, that I think would be interesting one day. Primarily just because you get to be the person that calls the shots and has a very large impact on the trajectory of a brand. But yeah, so that's kind of how I got my start. And along the way, somewhere in there, there's a bunch of other stories about building Audi of America and their social presence, getting hired by Gary Vee, and working on a bunch of cool beer brands and stuff like that. But so yeah, there's been a lot of fun stuff in between. But here we are.
And here we are. And we're going to talk about some of that. Specifically, what I want to ask you, since you brought up the social aspect, is you're an OG to the social game, right? 2008, you've been in this since before Facebook was really even a full blown company. A lot has changed in that time frame. What is something that hasn't changed? We've seen it change. 13 years is a long time for social media marketing to really be, growing and scaling, all those things. What's something that is still just as relevant today that was as relevant in 2008?
The technology that you access social media from, it has changed in the sense that it's evolved, but the importance of the hardware has always remained pretty consistent. So I would say back in 2000, even way before 2008, when I was operating as a professional in the social media space, there was the act of getting online and accessing like a MySpace or a Facebook from your desktop. Eventually it morphed and became more prevalent to access such social platforms through your mobile device. And I'd say since the advent of the iPhone, which came out roughly 1 year before I was active in the social media space professionally, the mobile phone has pretty much dominated user behavior and attention. So those things kind of go hand in hand. They're yin and yang with one another. The attention is right there, and it's palpable on this device. I haven't seen it shift much. There was always the threat of certain other areas of being able to kind of bifurcate customer attention into areas like, voice and, what's going on your television screen. And I'd say, like, by and large, people do consume content on multiple different devices. But I haven't seen anything slowing down in terms of how much time and attention people spend putting their eyeballs on these things. In fact, it's only increased.
Sorry. You just triggered a thought. I just got my Stork email. If you're listening to this, you don't know what Stork is, go check out Stork from the Sasha Group. I wasn't host of the episode, but we had the pleasure of having Mr. James Orsini on. Gosh, it was probably about this time last year, right as Stork was rolling out. And I know that some listeners of the show went and signed up for Stork, but just got my Stork email talking about the power of vertical video. Obviously, that's been a theme and a constant theme for the Stork newsletter and that product suite. Can you talk a little bit about how brands are using vertical video today? Assume that someone listening to this is maybe a media owner who's just considering, should I be on social media? How can I use video? I hear all these things talked about. Maybe give me the 60-second pitch on vertical video.
So vertical video is highly addictive. They call it V3, viral vertical video. TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, they've all pioneered V3 or vertical viral video. But I think viral vertical video, that is, it's a tongue twister. I think TikTok's really scaled it and blown it out to the next level. But by highly addictive, I mean highly addictive. You've got people like yourself speaking to you in a very authentic manner. And it's not just people doing crazy skits and dances, which is what it gets, kind of a reputation for. I'd say one of the more powerful aspects of V3 is the people that are just like yourself, that are interested in the same topics, that are giving you life hacks. So whether you're an auto dealer or somebody that runs a church and you're a pastor, if you're a copywriter, you can make hay as an influencer on TikTok by, basically just being yourself and talking about the things you care about. And brands should think like influencers on that platform. You should be going out trying to add value to people's existence. So, if you're a good example, especially in the small business world with what I do at Sasha Group right now, if you're a lawyer or you're a tax accountant, if you're somebody that's in any kind of service business, and you feel like you have a really strong grip on what your company does and what the value prop is, go onto TikTok. You don't have to focus on like constantly shilling your products and services for your, overarching company, but just get out there and talk about, what not consumers, but what people need to know at tax time. Like we just went through a massive pandemic. Is there anything different about your receivables and your taxes? Like people want to know this kind of stuff, and they're going to TikTok more than they ever have been before to stumble upon content from experts like yourself. So I'd say one aspect is that, but I think you also have to look at the interplay between your own personal brand and your company's brand, and understand the fact that they don't have to be wholly separate entities. You can be creating your personal brand, and that can benefit the corporate brand. So you could be driving interest and traffic into your funnel by increasing the visibility of you as a person.
And speaking of change and change management and adapting with the times and circumstances, you were pretty early on at Vayner, employee 325, and you've seen a lot of change take place over that time. A story that I'm particularly interested in is around the AB InBev and the ingestion of like the Hasbro team, and how you went from a kind of small team to a huge team in a relatively short period of time. If you could maybe give us a little primer on that specific instance, and then I'd like to talk through like what it means to be a leader in an organization that's rapidly expanding, and how you manage personalities and workflows and all of those things. So maybe if you could just start us with the context, we can unpack that a little bit.
Sure. So you have to understand, like anything I do, I can only do because I'm already operating in a really great harmonious framework. So because I came into Vayner at an era in which Gary was really concentrating on top line revenue and growth anyway, we were less concerned about, stewing over our losses and stuff like that. It was more about how do we add revenue and keep our nucleus of highly talented people. And I also, being in client service for a number of years prior to that, I had seen like some of the most heartbreaking things, like my own agency losing Audi of America, which was the brand that I built on social media, for lack of a better terminology. So I know that in many service-oriented businesses, it's much like a product life cycle, right? There's always a beginning and an end, and it's usually in a donut shape. There you're going to go through an uprising, and you're going to go through a tumultuous time where eventually relationships end. Unless you're Saatchi and Toyota, pretty much everybody in advertising break up. So when I got to Vayner, Gary put me on AB InBev, which was really small at the time. It was like maybe 3 employees.
Wow.
I had one brand. We executed a project for Budweiser, but we had one retainer, which was Shock Top. And then on the other hand, I inherited the Hasbro account, which was in its like 6th year of existence. There were really good relationships there. I think it was just, some things had gotten stale. I know there were some challenges working together in terms of like, SOW writing and kind of what we were doing and what we were getting paid for, and, e-scope creep and all that kind of stuff. But there was a little bit more, toxicity over on that end, even though there was 20, 30 people over there, and there was far less people in a newer relationship that had more promise over on the AB InBev side. So eventually, like 6 months to a year in to my working at Vayner, we had gone in and we had sold in Bud Light and Stella and some other brands. I think Bud Light Ritas and Lime and all that. We had been creating some palpable energy and momentum on the AB InBev side, but Hasbro was still kind of plateauing to declining. And so me and AJ, Gary's brother, and Gary kind of butted our heads together and decided maybe my focus should be more in the AB InBev world and growing that versus managing Hasbro, which was very challenging and time consuming. So I went and focused on AB InBev. And about 6 months after that point, the Hasbro AB InBev, Hasbro VaynerMedia relationship had gotten severed, and Hasbro decided to go in a different direction. Because I had some experience and exposure with a lot of the folks that were on some of those teams, like the Nerf and Monopoly teams and all that kind of stuff, I got a chance to see where the players were in that organization and understand who might be good on some of my other accounts as we were growing. So I kind of lucked into one of the biggest advantages of all time, a CEO that was growth oriented and top line revenue oriented, a system of brands that was growing and building over time. We were building a lot of reputation in the hallways of AB InBev. So we were winning contracts at a pretty frequent clip without much of a hard sell. Where it's not like I was answering a ton of RFPs. A lot of it was organic growth. And then we had a supply of talent in the building already that was getting ready to be free agents, essentially, because we were getting ready to lose a massive client in the building. So we were able to kind of move quickly and match the rate of growth that AB InBev was seeing. And I think that was key in being able to hit a few things out of the park in the early stages of our relationship. Because if I had to go out and hire all those people that we needed to hire off the street, it would have sapped a lot more of my time, energy, attention, cost. What most people don't realize is that there's a cost associated with hiring that kind of gets swept under the rug. But you have to invest a lot of time writing job specs, interviewing people, hiring them, training them, and just to get them up to the level of a replacement in most cases. So in that sense, like, it was a godsend. It was a blessing that Hasbro was exiting as AB InBev was growing. But I'd say that was only like part of the growth story of AB InBev in the very early stage of it. The second part of it was more, it was based on the work and the tremendously talented strategists and creative that were doing such a good job. But as we started adding in clients like Budweiser in the US and some other brands, one of the ways in which I was kind of leading the team was based on my interpretation of what Gary wanted to do holistically. So what I saw in the market at the time was a tremendous amount of focus on the mobile device, as I mentioned before, and specifically within that universe, video. So a couple of things have been happening in the years prior. 2014, the month I got there, we had an all hands about organic reach going to basically nothing on Facebook because they created a pay-to-play environment. They were getting ready to roll out Blue app for mobile. They were getting ready to launch all their targeted ads, that whole ecosystem of ad products. And they were sitting on really good data. And we knew it because Gary was an investor in Facebook. Sure. So there was not much we could do. It didn't really make sense sitting around crying over spilled milk and wishing the world would go back to organic. So instead, I kind of looked at the market and said, all right, here's a data point over here, which is, things are going to have to go pay to play. Plus, Facebook is going to become much more robust in terms of their ad delivery mechanisms. The actual, capacity of the devices on iPhones and Androids were getting better at the time. I started looking at Mary Meeker reports, like State of the Internet, and noticing all the hockey stick-like trends that were happening in broadband internet. Multiple device per household penetration in every country around the world. And it was only expected to grow, not infinitely, but obviously at a steep incline for 5 more years to come. So I knew we had a long run rate to be focused on video delivery. And at that point, we really weren't there yet. So I just kind of put the challenge out to the team, and I just kept reiterating it over and over again to anybody that would listen. But I said, we're going to be the best at the world at creating videos for mobile phones and the best in the world at distributing them to the phones because nobody understood social like we did. So that implied two inherent things. It implied that we had to be really good at creative, making videos specifically, and we had to be really good at paid media, understanding how to get the videos to people so that they could consume them. And that also, and when I say kind of comes from Gary's vision, I mean, that's exactly like a direct ripoff from Gary's vision. Gary always has been a person that he's never understood why creative and media didn't exist within the same roof anyway, because he doesn't come from an advertising perspective. I just came with a different way to frame the vision so that my team would understand what our primary objective was over the next couple of years. And we went out and we dominated. So for, I don't know, the 5 years that I ran AB InBev, I think we wound up doing something between 400 and 500 incremental video projects for mobile phone, for digital. And that was above and beyond what our retainers looked like. So yeah, it kind of worked.
Yeah, no, it's pretty remarkable. And in a convergence, the stars aligning and one account going out. We've got the team already in place. They know the culture. They know the people. They will just absorb them and blow this up. And that makes good sense. How have you? I see it from a lot of members of the Vayner team that even through this work from home, remote work environment, like culture is paramount. Mm-hmm. And it's not like, you can tell when it's forced, right? Like, hey, everybody share this post on social today, go comment on Joe's post, right? It's not that. Like, the team at Vayner loves being on the team at Vayner. How has the culture changed in this remote work from home world? Has it changed, if at all? And what things are you maybe doing different to continue to cultivate that as the dynamic has changed, not being in an office?
I think that I can't speak for Vayner Media because I don't work there anymore, so I don't really.
Sure, Sasha. Yeah, I think of them all under the same
umbrella. I still have a lot of friends there, and anecdotally, I know that they've really reacted pretty positively and well to the pandemic as well. But Sasha Group specifically, I think the reason why we've had some success there with the pandemic and being able to grow revenues and grow headcount during a really challenging time was because we didn't see it as a handicap, right? Like, coming into the pandemic, I'd say March, we took a really big gut punch from a revenue perspective because all of our clients did, right? So immediately nobody really knew what was going on. And we took a gut punch just like everybody else did, because as clients' supply chains got wrecked, they couldn't afford to pay their bills.
Right.
Not couldn't afford it, but they weren't certain about the future. So they paused some payments and stuff like that. But we weathered that storm pretty well. We got out there immediately and acted with compassion and empathy and started talking to all of our clients and really just wanted to check in with them and see how we could help strategically as a partner. And then after that, we didn't really sit around, sitting on our hands. We developed a suite of products that we could sell online virtually that, were kind of like an iteration of what we used to do in person, to just kind of be able to get over the hurdle. And I think the interesting part about that time was that I don't know, I can't speak for everybody, but I can know me, myself, I was looking for an education experience. I was looking to learn, about how we could make virtual happen in perpetuity, because one of my sixth senses was that this thing is not going to end for a while, and the future of marketing is probably contained within the learnings that we get out of the next 2 years. So how can we go in there and start perfecting some of these Zoom events, Zoom platforms, or Google Meet, whatever your preference may be, Teams. But how can we take advantage of this blessing in disguise, essentially? Like, one of the things I don't think most people realize is that the pandemic basically accelerated our adoption of augmented and virtual reality and our need for connected internet and having enough broadband to have conversations like this by about 5 years, like we're doing right now in 2021, which wasn't ticketed or targeted at being possible until 2026. Wow. That's unfathomable, right? Like, in 2008, we could have never weathered a pandemic like this because we could have never been on one Zoom call without a single interruption. Now I can be on 10 in a day.
Great point.
So the way I look at it is we've got this massive opportunity where technology is closer and more accessible than it ever has been. Why not get a leg up on everybody else? I'll let everybody else go out there and complain about why they can't be in an office. I don't care. I'm going to learn how to adjust and survive, and not only survive, but thrive. And I think that's why companies like VaynerX, thrive in areas like this, because we've got a founder that's in his DNA. It's change. Change is the only constant in life.
Oh yeah. I got introduced to Gary whenever Thank You Economy came out, and read that book. And I was like, oh my gosh, this guy grew up not far from me in New Jersey. He sold baseball cards at the mall. I got my prom tuxedo from. I felt like I knew Gary in this way, but he's been talking about this, to your point, for, well over a decade. And something that I've only ever heard James Orsini talk about, that if you could offer any insight around, this is my one Gary specific question, is I heard James on a podcast talk about early on, it was about building a structure of senior level executives around Gary to give Gary a brand, to scale the Gary V brand. Can you speak to that at all? It's, I think generally folks think about, let me find, junior level folks, generalists, but there was a very specific focus on, no, we're going to build out a senior level executive team to scale this crazy fast. Can you offer any insight around that?
Well, so I can speak. So I came into the company a little bit before James, so I can, I don't know if I can tell you exactly what he was thinking when he said that, but I can try to give you some context around what the company looked like when I started versus what it became after there was some more build out of the senior leadership team, or the cabinet, or whatever you want to call it, the chiefs, if you will. So when I got to Vayner as employee 325, I was one of the oldest people outside of Gary, right? There was not a lot of people and I was 35 at the time. I wasn't that old, but I was 35. And I was one of the older people. Gary was getting ready to go through, I think one of the reasons I was hired was because I fit a specific, quadrant of the Venn diagram. I could, on one hand, there was this part of the Venn diagram which was can you talk to CMOs, right? Without becoming too overwhelmed. And then on the other end was, do you actually understand social media, right? You merge those two ends of the Venn diagram. There's very few people that actually matched both of them. And the ones that did were a little bit on the younger and less experienced side, right? Because they knew social media, but they didn't necessarily have the stature of knowing how to interact and mingle with the most senior people in business. And the ones that did have that senior experience typically only understood how to make TV ads, right? Because that's the people that have been around for 15 years, they've been doing integrated marketing campaigns, TV ads, stuff like that. There wasn't somebody that looked like me. There was maybe I don't know, a couple dozen of us that existed that have been operating since 2008 or before that. So I came in really to help, kind of take over big, huge portfolios like AB InBev, Hasbro, stuff like that, GE. And then they hired a slew of people like me. They hired my old boss, Mark Evans, who now is at the Sasha Group with me. They hired Maribel Lara, who's also at the Sasha Group with me now. There's a raft of us, Katie Hankinson, similar. And we all came in to build out these portfolios and really give a senior level of client oversight while understanding social media strategically. Then they started bringing in the C-suite members, and James was one of them. They brought in a new CFO eventually. They started, a chief creative officer at some point. We hired a chief strategy officer. And all of that was done, in my opinion, to give us more scale, not only from, we need to be able to hold down the fort so Gary can go off and build out more departments and help grease the skids of being able to bring in more clients. But I also think part of it was around the same time, Gary started really focusing on his personal brand a lot more, So prior to that moment, he had written a few books. He was already pretty famous on Twitter. But circa 2015, he hired D-Rock. They started filming the Clouds in the Dirt content, launched Ask Gary V. After that, Daily V followed a couple years later. But a lot of Gary's time and effort started going towards building out, the Gary V brand more as well. And that's been a massive part of our business development funnel. As Gary gets more famous, VaynerX grows, right? All of the different companies that we own now benefit from people wanting to get close to Gary V, wanting to work with Gary V. So I do believe that people like James were brought in to help scale Gary. In which way he specifically intended it to be, I'm not sure. I just know kind of the way it worked out. We wound up acquiring a bunch of companies. We wound up building a lot more departments and a lot more companies from scratch. And if you're going to do stuff like that, you need to have really sound financials and people that have operated at these types of scales, like James and Alan and, various different leaders that have done it before.
You were 325. How big is the team today? All the Vayner properties, if you had to stick a pin in it, any idea how many people that it touches?
I don't have an accurate number, but I've heard whispers that it's in the 1,100 range, maybe.
Wow, that's remarkable.
That includes I think Gary owns 10 or 11 companies now. We're operational on most continents. We're in Mexico City. We've got a small little crew of people out in Australia. We've expanded pretty rapidly from what I understand in APAC. So we've got Singapore, but then there's a bunch of regional hubs as well. I believe the plan is to get more expanded down in South America. That's why Mexico City is there, but I wouldn't put it past us to open something up in South America proper one of these days. But we're fully integrated. So where we were originally when I came in, we were a community management focused shop and the social media marketing specifically focused shop. Now we're fully integrated. So, VaynerMedia, the big sis, big brother, whatever you want to call them, strategy, media, creative, project management, account management, the whole 9 yards. There's not a thing we can't do under the marketing umbrella. So typically when you offer that level of service, you're going to grow. You're going to have people,
Yeah. And because I know you're a student of advertising, it's been a hot button issue. My response is Ogilvy made plenty of money before there was anything like data and targeting and measurement. As we see more of these things roll out, as we see privacy become really the forefront of brand positioning of how do you use data responsibly as a brand, what are you most excited about as we maybe detach ourselves from this, everything has to be attributable? What are you most excited about as an advertising purist and maybe this little bit of a reset for data in the advertising conversation?
So I think just experiencing the world in new and unique ways. I always like seeing, seeing the world kind of move along at a faster pace. So one of the things that I get this question, not this specific question a lot, but I do get asked primarily I get asked from a lot of people that I mentor, or I get asked from people that are entering into the marketing world that see my career and want to model after it. And they ask me, well, what would you do if you were me? Or how would you get to where you are if you were me? And my response to them is usually, no, I wouldn't want to be me if I were you. I would want to be to what is going to be relevant 20 years from now, 15 years from now. Mm-hmm. And my answer to them is look, when I planned to be in social media back in the day, it didn't happen specifically because I wanted to be in social media. It happened because I walked through the windows of opportunities as they were open for me. And I think most people should do the same thing. We should all have an eye on what we think is going to be the elixir of the economy in 2035. And so from that perspective, if I had to start today and just go into hardcore research mode and try to figure out how to shape my life and career, which honestly, I probably will do that at some point as well. I don't like Gary. I don't want to get tied down and too specific to what I'm doing now and get too romantic about this is the way, this has to be the way. That's what ruined TV and magazines and all that kind of stuff. If I had to look at what I think is going to be relevant to 60-year-old me or to, my daughter when she's 21, I would say spend time understanding the blockchain, spend time understanding anything VR, AR, virtual and augmented reality, understand psychology and communications, understand empathy. We as humans are evolving as well, and we're being asked to do more than we ever have been in the past on less time. And that's okay. It's not a bad thing, I don't think. I think it's just we're learning how to take more advantage of who we are as a species and our time that we're being given on this earth. So some of these technologies are going to aid us in being able to just comprehend and process all of that information. So I would be really interested in understanding those things because I think the world is going to revolve around them. I think I could very well see. And I say this just because there's a multitude of side benefits that could come of this. Could you imagine a world in which Gary Vee doesn't have to get on a plane to go give a speech in Tokyo? He can just beam his hologram there and it's just the same thing and people would pay just as much money for it. I can. And guess what? The technology's not far off and we'd save a ton of carbon emissions not flying Gary Vee to 250 cities a year. Now, I don't know if that's how many he traveled before the pandemic and stuff, but I know he was on the road a lot. So those are the types of things I'd be embracing. I don't want to be on Zooms all day long, but I don't mind. I think it'd be kind of cool to have a leadership meeting where, I can be in my house, but it also feels like we're in a conference room in Hudson Yards because all of our, likenesses are representative. So, I think that'll also spill into our communications as well. The other thing I think about is in your industry, out of home. Like for so long, things revolved around the city, and now things are coming back out to the suburbs and to the exurbs, and they're inventing terms like exurbs and stuff like that. But what are the opportunities there? Like if somebody's spending all their day on back-to-back Zoom conferences, and then like me breaking up the monotony by going for a walk around the neighborhood, how do you reach them in those moments that aren't, you might not have a billboard opportunity, but there's probably some opportunity in there to kind of reach them when they're, ramping up or ramping down from their current workday. And it's not just look out the window, see a billboard, right? So I think there's that stuff's super interesting to me as well. Like what are the population migration patterns and what is the world going to look like? Are we going to continue to have our industry revolve around cities like New York and Atlanta and Miami, LA, Chicago, San Francisco? Or is it going to be a little bit more stratified? Are we going to be, more of like a global community that happens to be in different locations?
Yeah. And it's one of the reasons I'm so excited to be out of home at this time. It feels like being maybe like early Google, like Google, 2002, before things really explode, because out of home has that power to create real world experiences. And it's based on movement. We don't need data and targeting. Oh, you want to target people that go to the gym? Well, hey, there's a billboard outside the gym, or there's an advertising opportunity in the gym. If you want to target people based on real world behavior, there's no better way to do it than with out of home. In the brands that you work with, I think Sasha Group's really focused on that $1 million to $250 million company. How do you advise those folks around something like out of home? Do you have clients that are using out of home? Are you having more conversations about the use of out of home? What are you seeing on that side?
I think it really depends on what type of company it is. Where I've seen the most interest in out of home is from startups that are building out double-sided marketplaces. So things that look like rideshare programs, things that look like apps that involve getting a buyer and a seller. So you have two ends of the spectrum in which you're trying to like create community and membership of. So, anytime you have that kind of thing where you're trying to create a buyer seller marketplace ecosystem, you typically want to take advantage of geolocation. You want to take advantage of local cultures. Things like live read on the radio as well works in that environment. But I'd say it's typically it's kind of ironic because I've seen it more on the higher ticket clients, but not in the old school traditional CPG marketers. It's more on the very well endowed VC funded, companies with hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank that are going to try to spend a lot of cash very fast to gain some notoriety. They're using the marketing mix a little bit more in a little bit more of an integrated fashion. Whereas, your CPG brands that we deal with that are smaller, maybe they're a little mom and pop service companies, stuff like that. They're really focused on scaling their business from a digital transformation perspective. So they've been doing terrestrial stuff for years and years. Maybe they've taken out ads in the yellow pages. Maybe they've done some, spot marketing here and there on billboards, or they've run some local TV ads. But when they come to us, they've got limited funds and they're looking to spend them very surgically. And that's typically more digital transformation. So getting them on something like Facebook and Instagram, on Google, YouTube, and just activating in the mid to lower funnel can help them, recognize some immediate dividends. So it really just depends. I'm not again, I've only been doing this at the Sasha Group now for a year and a half. I can't necessarily speak for Mark Evans or James Orsini or Mickey Cloud and some other folks that do business development, what they've seen. What I've seen specifically is when we have customers that are interested in out of home, it's primarily coming from, I would say, closer to that $250 million range of annual revenues. And they're predominantly newer companies, startups, tech companies, people that they're generating income via apps, stuff like that.
It's funny, and I'm going to snip this clip, Mike, from production. If you could just intentionally snip this clip for me. We're building a two-sided marketplace at one screen for out-of-home advertising because it's clunky and hard to buy and fragmented, and because we want to make it accessible to a lot of the types of companies that you mentioned there. And that's really who we're having a lot of success with. They've spent as much money as they can on Facebook and are obviously affected by some of the iOS updates and looking for ways to diversify the media mix and turning to out of home. So gosh, I couldn't have paid you to give a better answer to that. So
but we're also not just like traditional e-commerce companies. So like traditional DTC companies, they're still predominantly just trying to figure out how to sell product on Amazon or their website. And if Facebook's not as effective from a ROAS perspective as it was 9 months ago, now they're trying to figure out how to set up, a more robust DSP and like get into OTT and all that kind of stuff. But the two-sided marketplace thing, for some reason, I always hear about radio, podcasting, out of home, like that stuff comes up when I talk to those guys for some reason. I don't know why.
Cool. It's an exciting time. It makes me feel good about starting a podcast about out of home. The convergence of those two things. I want to bring us home on this thought here, because I've heard you talk to it, and even just getting to know you, is how important is setting intentional time for thinking in this world where we're so focused on production and work from home. I can get more done and do all these things. How important is time to just think?
I think it's super important. I'm like a very goal-oriented individual. So, and I think one of the things that Gary always reminds people of that's resonated with me over the year is understanding the difference between the macro and the micro, right? And understanding that they're always going on at the same time. Like it's okay to be busy and hustling in the micro while always kind of slowing down and taking a look at the broader spectrum in the macro. So for me, it's just really making sure that you have the right tools to be able to do the thinking and that you're setting aside the right amount of time. And James likes to bring up an example, and he's used it from time to time, called the Eisenhower matrix. So I went out and found an app on the iTunes store called Focus Matrix, which is essentially an Eisenhower matrix. And what it does is it splits your tasks up into quadrants, and you've got one that's important and urgent, one that's important and not urgent, one that's not important but urgent, and then one that's not important or urgent. And the goal is to kind of move stuff through that matrix and be able to, like, out of the 100 things you have to do, if you've got, if you can move 7 to the red matrix, which is, important and urgent, that helps you think through those 100 tasks and be able to put a better effort towards what really matters. While if you've got stuff going on in other quadrants, you can either delay those initiatives or you can delegate them out to some of your team members. So I find that, like, it's not just important to think, but it's also important to know how to think and how to create a framework for yourself that allows you to do the thinking that you need to do. So that's one way, is an Eisenhower matrix or a focus matrix. Another way that I've been able to to really get into this with my team. And I would recommend people do it specifically with their inner circle, and then start, adding, start figuring out communication styles as you go out. But understanding the communication flow and the style of people that you work with, and having and setting those intentions at the beginning of a relationship are very important. So I've established with my team a very specific and strict protocol of of kind of what the rules of engagement are. With me and my time specifically, because I don't have a lot of it. I'm a father of 3 kids, and they're all young. They're 6, 5, and 1. And now, granted, those people on my team didn't do anything to, warrant having a boss that has that kind of lifestyle. But I think it's really important for me to tell them, this is who I am. This is what my life looks like. Therefore, these are the types of ways that communicating for me is going to be effective for you, right? Like it's for the benefit of you, that you understand my life and how to reach me to be most effective. And it works both ways. It's important for me to understand your lifestyle so I can understand the culture in which you work within, right? So if you're a community manager and you spend all day long in Slack talking to team members across the country, and I'm over here sending you text messages that you're not looking at because your phone's plugged in across the room, then it's kind of shame on me. I didn't really get into your mindset, and it's me that is the person that came to you with the request. So just kind of understanding that teams operate in a way in which you can psychologically understand them. Like teams can operate like an individual. And if you can hack at the psychology of how that team operates in unison with one another, I find that as long as you're being transparent about what you're doing and you're setting it up that way in advance, you get a much better result from your team. What I don't have a lot of is I don't have a lot of people complaining to me, right? Like people don't come to me complaining that they can't get a hold of me. Even though I'm very busy all the time, it's because they know how to get a hold of me. They know that if they want a response from me, if they want me to approve something they've done, and they want it in 5 minutes, that they got to send me a text or they've got to send me a Marco Polo. Just like I know that if I need to get my producer of Stork, Eric, to do something, that I'm probably going to have to send him a Slack and a text, right? Those 2 levels of communication will usually break through to him. And I think that's just kind of it. It's kind of figuring out what the unlock codes are for the people in your life. And as long as you're adhering to them, like usually attitudes and behaviors are pretty good. Most people don't get angry. They don't get hostile. And they actually appreciate it a lot more. So that's kind of what, the last bit I'll kind of impart. I know we talked about it right before we got on here was understanding you and yourself. Like for me, I told you right before we got on here, like I'm an introvert. I get my energy from like my one-on-one time with myself, and being able to carve out some of those longer, blocks on my calendar where I can think deeply and strategically on a project. That gives me a lot of benefit and a lot of energy. Being on Zoom calls all day, they drain the energy out of me. So what I noticed early in the year is that I was getting into a bad habit of just accepting all invites that came onto my calendar. And I know better than that. So it didn't take me long to nip it in the bud and kind of course correct. But it was more why I decided to have a communication with my team about it that I think has led to a more harmonious kind of atmosphere. I actually went and did a survey. I wouldn't say a scientific survey. I polled some people on LinkedIn, but I did get about 75 responses back. And from what I was learning from my cohorts and peers in the industry was that you really shouldn't be on more than like 3 to 5 meetings a day, right? So I started trying to bring that back into my life. And I told my team, hey, let's just try this, see how it works. No more than 5 Zoom calls a day, right? Let's just cap it. And if we need to have more meetings than that, we're not using meetings the right way. So I wanted to encourage them to understand why they were creating meetings, what the purpose of it was, and being more strict with themselves about how they set them up. So I usually require all my people, if you set up a meeting, you own that meeting, you're responsible for notes. You're responsible for writing, inviting people. If you mark people as optional, they truly are optional, and they have the option of not coming if they don't want to, or if they can't. So don't get into any politics about optional versus not optional. Like if you mean it, if they're optional, they can be optional, and it's your responsibility to understand if they don't show up and you needed them there, then they shouldn't have been optional. I also make people put in objectives of meetings and agendas of meetings. That way, if it's a 15-minute meeting, I can understand whether we can actually get through the talking points in 15 minutes. That also helps me and people like James and Mark, because if 3 people invite us to the same to 3 different meetings at the same time, and we're sitting there trying to evaluate which meeting to take and which meeting to push off, for me, the winner always is the one that gives me the more detailed meeting agenda. Because if you're just putting something on willy-nilly and not telling me what the meeting is for and what you want the outcome to be, I'm going to assume that this is just a think tank meeting that can be handled in a different fashion. The other thing I've done is I've paid for my employees' Marco Polo subscription. So if you really think you need to get a team together to think on a topic and align on an issue, send a group Marco Polo. We'll get it as a message. I also make them keep the notifications turned on so that I can guarantee that the messages come through to them. But once they do come through to them, then okay, we're getting a message that comes through in the form of something like a text. So it's immediate for people that are more tethered to their phone. But then we're also getting context, right? We're getting facial expressions. We're getting tone of voice coming through. We're getting the message the way that it was intended to be inside of a meeting setting. The main difference is that everybody that's on the team that needs to weigh in can watch the meeting at their own time frame. It doesn't have to be immediate. It could be, within a 5-hour time frame. You're still going to get your answers from all of us, but you don't have to navigate this confusing labyrinth of 5 people's schedules just to pick out the 15-minute meeting to just put something on people's calendars that's going to drive them nuts anyway. So that's kind of how I'm handling time right now is understanding myself, understanding the broader team, and then trying to put measures in place that can kind of streamline our lifestyles that make working from home, working remote, working on Zoom all the time palatable. And I think it's working.
This has been a master's class, Joe. I can't thank you enough. I think that the audience is going to get a lot of value out of this as the workforce, as the team dynamics are constantly changing, as advertising, as social media marketing continues to change, and how all of those things fit together. This has been awesome. How can folks get in touch with you, find you, where are you most active? Maybe plug Sasha Group, Stork, give them the lat long.
I think a good place to reach me if you wanted to chat about all things life, business, marketing would be LinkedIn. I haven't been as active as I'd like to be. This life is catching up to me with birthdays and stuff like that. But yeah, I do check LinkedIn at least once a day. So feel free to DM me there. It's just search my name, Joseph Quattrone, Joe Quattrone, or Super Quattrone, which is usually my handle on most social properties. I do get on Twitter and Instagram every once in a while. So you can reach me there as well.
Awesome. We'll make sure to link out to all that below. We'll make sure to link to Sasha Group. We'll make sure to link to Stork. If you're not on Stork, you should be. It's just weekly content and a great group and just access to a ton of information. And especially in today where it's so busy, you do a really great job of curating top actionable, tactical, and practical insights. So Joe, thank you.
And if anybody wants to join Stork, I'll offer 10% off to your audience. Just DM me on LinkedIn and let me know. And I'll arrange to have a link sent over to you that you can apply to the discount at checkout. Typically, our product is $300 for 12 months. But obviously, I'll give you the 10% off, and it'll be $30 off that product. So come hang out. Learn from us, learn from the Sasha Group folks. It's not Gary Vee specific content. It's just people that have worked a long time for Gary Vee in there doing the how-to stuff. In fact, James, I think holds the record for our most successful one. He did a how to do a business plan episode of Stork back in January. And I think it helped one of our Stork members onboard a massive investment in their company. So you can get your money's worth just by watching Jason's content. Trust me.
Awesome. Well, if you found this to be helpful, I encourage you to share it with somebody else who could benefit. Make sure to smash that subscribe button down below in the corner, and we'll see y'all next time.
Quarter century, I finally came to my senses. I finally got my hand up on the tinted Benz, kid. I see the world clear through my tinted lenses. With the dream and the drive, the possibilities endless. Now print that, send this all the way to Tokyo. Take a trip down south, down to Mexico. Next stop, Shanghai, the world-class trade show. First class all the way, cause that's how we roll. Yeah, call us the rock star businessman. Rockin' shows, we handle business, man. We got our own future in the palm of our hands, cause divide